Everybody knows their Marvel Silver Age keys, but we're going to take a look at DC Silver Age keys, the 10 most expensive DC books from the Silver Age. There are a couple of surprises. Up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hey there, comic book community. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. And before we get started, give us a like, comment, subscribe. We appreciate all that. Follow us on other socials. I'm on Instagram at Bronzeville_comics. Whatnot, Bronzeville_comics. We do Whatnot sales pretty much Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern time. Our next sale is going to be an Avengers sale. And then coming up later in August is going to be a big Marvel Silver and Bronze Age sale. A lot of key books, a lot of silver books from Marvel. We got some Thor, we got some Captain America, a little FF, Iron Man, a whole bunch of stuff. And just follow us on Whatnot and bookmark the shows when they come up. I also have been doing some pop-up sales to sell some books. So also, my eBay store is in the description below. So let's talk about the top 10 DC Silver Age keys based on price. And what I did was I used cover prices data for a 4.0, which is an approachable grade for these kinds of books. Most of these books don't exist or very rare in the very high grades. So I figured a 4.0 was a good place to look for the price. In some cases, I kind of had to extrapolate prices because there haven't been specifically 4.0 sales recently. If there were sales around a 4.0, I was able to come up with an approximation. Now, interestingly, there's only one book in this list that I own. And I think, unless you're really tuned into what's there was one book that surprised me in its presence on this list. But let's get started. Number 10 on the list is Flash, number 105 from March of 1959. And this is the reboot of Flash Comics. Flash Comics, starring the Golden Age Flash, Jay Garrick, and also featuring Hawkman, Johnny Thunder, and others, ran for 104 issues in the Golden Age. When Flash became a breakout star in some showcase appearances, might talk about that later, it was decided to give him his own comic. And instead of starring with Flash Comics number 1, they continued the numbering, and it was just Flash rather than Flash Comics with issue 105. That book, approximately 4.0, is about $1,800. And I think one of the reasons that they started with 105 was because at the time, people didn't like number ones. It was something new and unproven. It wasn't like it would become in the 70s where a number one was an event, or starting in the 80s when you really had more comic collectors who would collect number ones. So number ones had larger print runs. For the distributors at the time, it was something that was proven. They were like, oh, I've already sold 104 issues of this. There must be something going on there. So that's number 10. Number 9 on the list is the only book I own, and that is this one, Action Comics 252, the first appearance of Kara Zor-El, Supergirl. And this book in a 4.0 is about $2,500. It is from May of 1959. And it really kind of set off this huge Superman family where there were, for years, Superman was the last son of Krypton, the only surviving Kryptonian. Well, there were plenty of others. There were Kandorians, there were Phantom Zone criminals, there was Supergirl, there was monkeys and dogs, and all sorts of survivors of Krypton. But Supergirl really is the one that had the most popularity. There possibly is a Supergirl movie at some point. There has been the TV show that we saw recently with Melissa Benoist that ran for several seasons on CBS and then CW. And Sarah Calais is supposed to play Supergirl in the upcoming Flash movie. Again, when we talk about speculating on this towards DC TV and movie properties, that's exceedingly difficult right now. But these are books that have been keys for years. And it's what I refer to as the books have intrinsic value. It isn't something that pops because we saw a character suddenly appear or be mentioned as part of a movie or TV property. These are books that have been popular for years with characters that have sustained. So, moving on to number 8 on our list, and we're going back just 10 months to July of 1958 to Action Comics number 242 and the first appearance of Brainiac. Now, there aren't a lot of Superman keys. Even in the Silver Age, his biggest nemesis, Lex Luthor, much like Batman's villains, were introduced in the Golden Age. But Brainiac was a Silver Age villain and probably Superman's number 2 adversary, at least throughout the Silver and Bronze Age. A character that has evolved over time, has been in Superman stories for many years, was included in the Krypton TV show on Sci-Fi, but is a very large villain in DC mythos. Again, Action Comics 242, much like 252, is about a $2,500 book in a CGC 4.0. And again, that's the metric that I'm using. I'm using cover price data. And I just noticed today, I guess they had been testing it like last week, the format of cover price has changed to something I like a little bit better in terms of how they organize their raw books. They've always tried to give their raw books a number grade equivalent to a graded book, but now they categorize them as like near mint to mint and very fine to near mint, and I guess maybe very good to fine, something like that. They have like maybe 5 or 6 different categories where they catalog the raw books, and it's a little bit helpful when I use it when I'm pricing books to go and say, okay, this book is a very fine. What have raw very fines sold for recently? Unlike people who take a very fine and see what a 9.8 graded book is sold for. You have to know what you have in front of you. But if you do subscribe to Cover Price, check it out. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but I think I like the changes. And that's what I'm using here. Now, again, not every book was graded in a 4.0, so I did a little extrapolation. We're moving up to number 7 on the list. And the 7th book on the list is Showcase number 8, the second appearance of Barry Allen as the Flash from May of 1957, which is about a $2,600 book in a 4.0. Now, it's interesting that it took 4 months for Flash to get another appearance. DC really didn't seem to have an overarching plan in how to use these characters out of Showcase. Other books came along. I think the Challengers of the Unknown premiered in that period of time. And it was 4 issues later, which was 8 months, because it only came out bi-monthly, that we saw Flash again. It was time for DC to see that the character sold very well. They got positive fan mail and said, let's give him another try. And I think he had a 3rd appearance in Showcase before getting his own book. So this is our second listing of Flash on this list. Again, we're getting a movie. We've had a TV show that's being canceled. Flash is probably right in that second tier of heroes for DC. Right after the Trinity, I think Flash and Green Lantern are right at that next level. So this is a character that's been forever popular. Moving up to number 6 on the list, and that's Batman 121, the first appearance of Mr. Freeze, or as he was known in that appearance, Mr. Zero. One of the few villains, and the earliest of the major villains of Batman's, to debut in the Silver Age. A lot of his nemeses, Joker, Penguin, Catwoman, Riddler, Two-Face, etc., premiered in the Golden Age. So They have their first appearances in exceedingly expensive Golden Age books, and sometimes we get the first Silver Age appearance. This is one of the first Batman villains to get a premiere during the Silver Age. The book came out in February of 1959 and is approximately $3,000 in a 4.0 graded. Mr. Freeze, played by 3 different actors on the Batman 66 TV series. He was played by George Sanders, by, who else was it? Eli Wallach, and Otto Preminger. And, of course, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger in the terrible Batman and Robin film. Now, I don't know if the Matt Reeves Batman universe with Robert Pattinson as Batman is going to use as fantastical a character as Mr. Freeze. I think they're trying to stay away from superpowers to more grounded characters, like we saw Riddler and Joker, etc. But we'll see if anything comes out of that. Mr. Freeze is always a pretty popular Batman villain, and this was his first appearance. Again, he was known as Mr. Zero in the first appearance, and essentially the same character came back about 8 years later as Mr. Freeze. Number 5 on the list, from April of 1958, is Adventure Comics 247, the first appearance of the Legion of Superheroes. Now, the lead feature in Adventure Comics at this time was Superboy, and there was a one-off story where 3 superheroes from the future who had been inspired by him come back to the 1950s from the 30th century and want to initiate him into their superhero club. And it's Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Boy, as he was known in his first appearance, later to be Lightning Lad. Those are the 3 founding members of the Legion of Superheroes, and in appearances over the years in both Adventure Comics and with Supergirl and Action Comics, sometimes in Superboy, the Legion roster just grew and grew. This is their first appearance. They eventually became a backup in Adventure Comics and took over as the main feature with issue 300. Kind of pushing Superboy to background status, although he did have his own comic book series anyway. So a 4.0 graded of Adventure Comics 247 is about $3,400. And Legion of Superheroes has been a really underappreciated DC property. I'm not sure they know what to do with it because they're in the future. It's been rebooted several times in the last 30 plus years to different effects. Kind of that classic run from the 60s, including Jim Shooter taking over when he was just a teenager as the writer on that, and then kind of the Dave Cockrum, Mike Grell, Paul Levitz stories of the 70s, and then Levitz teaming with Keith Giffen as some great stuff in the 80s. Legion books are really underappreciated, and most people don't remember in the 1980s, Legion was probably right behind New Teen Titans in terms of big sellers for DC. Talking about teams, number 4 on the list, Brave and the Bold 28, the first appearance of the Justice League of America from March of 1960. Now, one of the surprises about this list is that this book is the only one on the list from the 1960s. All the other books are from the 50s. And all of these books predate the appearance of Fantastic Four #1. DC ushered in the Silver Age of superheroes, and Stan Lee and Jack Kirby followed up on that later on, essentially inspired by the DC success to create superheroes for Marvel Comics. Now, we all know that those Marvel Comics now outpace the DC Comics, but these DC books are older, tend to be scarcer, at least in higher grades than their Marvel counterparts, because all of these books came out on this list in a 4-year span between 1956 and 1960. One of the things that's interesting about Brave and the Bold 28 and the early issues of Justice League of America is they don't include Superman and Batman. Sometimes Superman and Batman appeared. They were rarely on the cover. It featured Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Green Lantern, Flash, and the Martian Manhunter. And it wasn't until later on that they kind of brought Superman, Batman in to bolster sales. The Justice League premiered in issue number 28. They were also in 29 and 30 before getting their own book, Justice League of America #1, later on, which just missed this list. Now, one of the big surprises in putting this list together is what comes in now at number 3. By the way, the Brave and the Bold is about a $3,840 book in a 4.0. Number 3 on the list is a book that I didn't expect and I wouldn't have guessed. So if you have 3 guesses left as to what's going to be on this list, what could it be? I think you can come up with 2 of them, but this third one is a little bit more difficult. And it's Our Army at War, number 83 from June of 1959, and the first appearance of Sgt Rock. This book is about $4,950 from my estimate in what would be a 4.0. That's really extrapolated because there are so few of these books that sell and are graded. On the CG census, there are only 188 blue label copies on the CGC census. 188. Now, for a book from the late 50s, that is very small. That is like a fraction of even the lower Marvel books. There's only one 9.0, which is the highest graded copy, and there are no 8.5s. Mostly lower grade, hard to find this book. And that's why it comes in at number 3, is its scarcity. Now, has it sold at this price for a 4.0? No, but some of the recent sales in lower grades led me to believe that it would come in at this place. I think at the very worst, it would certainly be in the top 10 anyway. And if a 4.0 came to market, I would expect it would probably garner close to $5,000. Now, you could probably now guess the top 2 on the list. Number 2 on the list is from October of 1959, Showcase number 22, the first appearance of Hal Jordan as Green Lantern. As is true with most of the DC heroes of the Silver Age, they are versions of Golden Age heroes. Flash, Green Lantern, a couple of heroes we haven't talked about, Hawkman and the Atom. Their appearances are a little bit later into the 60s, didn't quite make this list. But Alan Scott was the first Green Lantern in All-American Comics number 16. An absolute ghost of a book, a hugely expensive book in any grade. But this book in a 4.0 is approximately $5,500. It's got the really cool cover as opposed to Green Lantern number 1, which has a really awkward cover. And Green Lantern, as I said, Flash and Green Lantern come in right below Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman as like that secondary list. Probably the A-. I don't want to call them a B list, but the A- list of DC heroes. Because Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, along with Robin, who you can kind of goes with Batman, were the only heroes who stayed in their own titles from Golden Age all the way through the Silver Age and beyond. Aquaman and Green Arrow were backup features the entire time. Every other hero that was originated in the Golden Age disappeared after the Golden Age for every publisher, including DC. So when they rebooted, the 2 major heroes that were rebooted early on were Flash and Green Lantern. And I think that's what puts them in the A- list, just short of the Trinity. Interestingly, DC hasn't developed much in terms of Green Lantern since that Ryan Reynolds project, although the latest news is that they're actually going to go ahead with the HBO Max series, Green Lantern Corps, which they had already cast actors to portray Guy Gardner and Alan Scott. No, not Hal Jordan or Jon Stewart. I think they're saving those. I think the idea was to save them for movies. We'll see what happens with the new management over there at Warner Brothers Discovery. But again, Showcase 22, about $5,500 in a 4.0. That's number 2 on the list. And what's number 1? The book that started the Silver Age. We've alluded to it before. It's his 3rd appearance on this list. Number 1, Showcase number 4, first appearance of Barry Allen as the Flash from September of 1956, the beginning of the Silver Age. Now, this book ushered in a new era of heroes. Really, it had been 5 years where heroes had kind of disappeared, and the success of the Adventures of Superman live-action television series kind of got people interested in superheroes again, and eventually led to DC rebooting their heroes. Now, one of the things that Julius Schwartz, who was in charge of Showcase, Brave and the Bold, as the editor, really pushed was science fiction. You can see Green Lantern an outer space core of Green Lanterns. Hawkman was from another planet. Adam wasn't just a small guy. He was a guy who could shrink using science. He was a scientist. Barry Allen was a police scientist. So they used the science aspect a lot more in what was essentially the Atomic Age. Some people refer to the late Golden Age of comics as the Atomic Age, but the Silver Age definitely begins. You can put the date on it. Showcase number 4 came out, and it was cover dated September 1956. That book in a 4.0 is approximately $25,600. So it's about 5 times more expensive than any of the other books on this list. And because it's earlier, it's scarcer, and also it has so much more meaning because it is the first book of the Silver Age. Now, I only have one of these 10 books, which kind of disappoints me. But if you wanted to pick up 4.0s for all 10 of these books, you just probably need about $55,000 if you get a good deal. These books are expensive, but think about how inexpensive they are compared to their Marvel counterparts, all of which came out much later. Now, this list, 10 books on this list, none of these books is an issue number 1. Not a single issue number 1 on this list. There were a couple that missed. Justice League number 1, Green Lantern number 1 were close to being in the list, but they didn't quite make it. Also notice all from the late 50s and that one book from 1960, all very early in the Silver Age. The later Silver Age books are a little bit easier to come by, and so they're a little bit less expensive. Some of the big keys in there, like the first appearance of Batgirl, even the first appearances of Adam and Hawkman and Teen Titans, iconic characters and iconic teams. First Doom Patrol, they're not as expensive as these books, and these are really the blue chip DC keys. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I like to talk about DC because everybody else talks about Marvel, so you get a little bit more DC on this channel. I do have Marvel as well. Maybe next time we'll talk about some Marvel. Maybe I'll pick up some Marvel books. Who knows? Anyway, you can check out a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.